special guest, Reverend Sekou, talking about everything, including his new album, In Times Like These. And okay, Rev, I'm going to set up another thing for you here. We'll talk a little more politics and then maybe a little music. Cause that's, all right.
Music's far more interesting.
Yeah, quick thing. All right, I thought, when I was thinking again about my recent loss, I was thinking, well, it's a good time to be talking about be talking with a man of the cloth, right? And then I started thinking, where does that term "man of the cloth" come from? So I read up on it, and it turns out that in the 18th, 19th century, earlier, people dressed based on what their work was. So that's where bakers in white clothes came from. But it's like the great writer Samuel Johnson, he had to wear the uniform of the rich man that was the aristocrat that was paying his salary. So everybody dressed a certain way. And now basically, in recent years, it was mostly, clergymen, right, who dressed a certain way. And so that's how man of the cloth came to be clergyman. Then I was thinking about this book I read called Jennifer Government. It's like a science fiction book. And it's like everybody has to take the last name of whoever pays them. So like if I go to work for Coca-Cola, I become RJ Coca-Cola, right? And then I started thinking, well, then I guess Donald Trump would be Donald Koch brothers, right? And I guess it would be Bill and Hillary Citigroup, maybe. I don't know. So, and I started thinking, well, how do we get away from this thing that says money and our relationship to the system of money defines who we are?
Well, I mean, I think it begins with our capacity to imagine. It is easier for most people in the United States to imagine the end of the world before they can imagine the end of capitalism. Right, so that's part of it, is how do we imagine a world that is not predicated on commodity and things to be bought and sold. But the issue is that capitalism is in a crisis, which begins in 2018 with the collapse in the global economy through the artificial financial instruments that were being used to generate obscene amount of money and resources without producing anything to go back into the real economy as relates to people's needs and that kind of thing. And so we are in the midst of a financial crisis which produces Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring, Ferguson, and other forms of critique of the tyranny of capital. So I do think that we are in a moment, studies show that a significant amount of millennials embrace the ideal of socialism, and that there is a way in which a capitalistic critique are emerging. I think Mitt Romney in one election cycle talking about crony capitalism, right? Giving some kind of critique of capitalism as known. And so I think we've reached an interesting moment. The Democratic Socialists of America may rather have 25,000 members now. So there have been some elected socialist officials, city council level, like in Seattle and other places. So I think we're at a moment where there is enough political consciousness to push back against capitalism. And then part of that, our duty is to get the capitalism out of us in terms of how we imagine the world.
Paulo Freire, the Brazilian leftist educator, used to talk about internalizing the oppressor consciousness, the idea that we project that system in our hearts and in our heads, and we can't get out of it. So I appreciate what you say about imagining alternatives. Now let's talk about music. All right.
Far more interesting.
Yeah. And in your music, I hear a lot of blues. I loved the blues growing up. I hear a lot of gospel. And to me, in my mind, there's three kinds of gospel. There's black gospel. There's like white gospel, and then there's like boring church white gospel, and I like two of the three, right? But and I had to play the middle one for a while. But if I never play, I've got a mansion over the hilltop again, and it'll be okay with me. But but a lot of R&B too. I hear a lot of the people, the stuff that I grew up on. And who are your inspirations?
Well, this particular record came about through a dear friend, Anasa Troutman, who managed India Ari, who put me in touch and negotiated a deal with David Macias at 30 Tigers, which is the premier Americana label. So Jason Isbell, Sturgill, Simpson, and a number of other, Lucinda Williams, and a variety of great artists in this genre. And so we began to look at producers, and I interviewed Luther and Cody Dickinson and decided to go with them. And so we recorded the album at Zebra Ranch in Coldwater, Mississippi, a barn. You have to hold your phone up in the air to try to get a signal. It's so far off in the woods. And so Cody then recruited a musician named AJ Gent, who plays steel guitar. His grandfather introduced the steel guitar to the House of God denomination in the mid-30s. And
So is there some connection there with the Campbell brothers?
Yes, that same tradition, that same
Yeah.
of sacred steel. So, and then he went and got the great Charles Hodges, who played on all of Al Green's record. He played organ, and on all of Al Green's record, 25 gold and platinum records. And he and I co-wrote the song "Loving You Is Killing Me." That is on the album, and then Cody on drums, and then a young singer named Raina Slokovo Gonzalez did background, and so Art and Mark are two horn players who give you the Memphis sound when you want the Memphis sound, and so all of those folks.
Which for me, by the way, is like all the time.
and so the record has, we recorded the rhythm section live. Some of the songs are on first take, and so you hear the elements of those folks who were in the room, as well as with this particular album, I Wanted to Go Home. I recorded about an hour from Zen, Arkansas, so I would go home while I was recording the record. I'd go stand at my grandmother's grave, get some of that dirt between my toes, because I wanted to kind of dig deeper within the tradition that produced me.
And that's a powerful tradition. And Luther and Cody Dickinson, North Mississippi All-Stars, is great. And they're the sons of Jim Dickinson.
Yes, legendary.
Legendary. That's the word I was looking for. I was going to say mythical, but that's not right. Legendary.
Legendary.
He's actually real. He's legendary. He was real.
And I got a chance to tour with Cody and Luther. We did about 20 dates in the U.S. and in the U.K. Last summer when the record first came out, May 5th, 2017. And I was able to tour with them. They were very gracious and kind, and gave me 2 guitars on tour and showed me the ropes of the music industry. And so I really, really appreciate them.
Yeah, no, and it shows. Now I was gonna. You came up at a different time than me, and who'd you listen to coming up as a young man?
Well, so I listened to, of course, a lot of what my uncle used to listen to. He ran this gambling house that I used to hang out with him. And so I listened to a lot of Lou Rawls, particularly he loved Tobacco Road, or Mannish Boy by Muddy Waters, or Angel of Mercy by Howling Wolf, right? So. And then, of course, there was Mahalia Jackson and growing up, the Mississippi Mass Choir. There's the singer that I wish I could sing like, in terms of just the tone, quality, and depth of his music, is Donny Hathaway.
Oh, he was.
So the way there's a certain way he has a tone, the way he holds a note, and his breath control, and the passion that is articulated in his music. I listened to a lot of Donny Hathaway as well.
Yeah, I love that Fender Rhodes sound he gets on all his records too. It's really great. And The Ghetto has probably been sampled as much or more than any other.
And I really think one of the most perfect songs in the American songbook of the 20th century is his song "For All We Know."
For All We Know.
So I think it's about it's just 3 minutes of just sheer perfection. His tone, the plaintive quality of it, his phrasing, and then the musicianship on it, right? And it's just a beautiful, beautiful song. I think it probably second only to Nina Simone's version of Strange Fruit. There's a way that she captured it. She bends that note on that trees to suck, the way she bends the note.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
just,
about.
Just musical perfection.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is, and by the way, with Hodges on the record, you also have that connection with Al Green and that whole, the classics of the Memphis sound, the people that didn't get picked up that much outside of the soul circuit. I don't know if you ever connected with like Otis Clay, people like that. Otis Clay was amazing.
Oh, I know the name, yeah.
If you have,
I spent a little time with the Barclays, the Barkeys.
Yeah, yeah,
the
sure.
Barkeys.
Yeah.
So I spent a little time with them when I was in Memphis. It's just Memphis, I think, is the best musical city in the country. It doesn't have as a city, it does not have the economic resources. It's the largest gathering of poor black people in a metropolitan area in the United States, you know, per capita. But at the same time, and that could play a role in why there's such musical genius coming out of that place and continues to do. There's a young man that I went to college with, Steve Lee, who teaches at the Stax Academy there. And so just cranking out ridiculous musicians. And then there's the great Boo Mitchell, Willie Mitchell's son, who still runs that Royal Studio. I pray I'll be able to do my next album with him. And so there's just so much genius coming out of that place.
There really is. I don't know if there's something in the soil or, you know, plus it's the river and it's next to Mississippi and it's a confluence of, you know, whatever it is. But no, you're talking about all the grace now. So what's next for you in terms of the music?
Well, I'm touring. I just finished a tour. I did a couple dates in Sweden, played with a wonderful band of young Swedish guys there, the Demke brothers, who I'll be playing with at South by Southwest this year. And then there is, so I'm on the move. I have a show in St. Louis coming up, and the Kansas City Folk Festival, a university in Iowa, then to Seattle, then some speaking in Gettysburg, and then I'm making another run. And so I'm touring much of all the way through August. I have about 38-day tour in Canada this summer, and another festival, the Black Deer Festival, back in London. And so I'm doing music full time, and it's giving me great joy. You know, as an act, I'm also doing some writing as well. I have a essay called "The Task of the Artist in the Time of Monsters" that'll be out, and then a book on King called "This Ain't Your Daddy's Civil Rights Movement," Ferguson, Black Lives Matters, and the Legacy of Martin Luther King. And then lastly, I'm doing a more academic text called "The Liberation Theology of Ferguson," where I'm trying to discern some theological relevancy of that particular moment to see what the streets have to say to the seminary and the sanctuary.
That's great. And closing thought about In a Time of Monsters. Did you ever see the science fiction movie from the 50s, Forbidden Planet?
No.
So at the end of it, there's this ancient like alien machine, and everybody starts dying and being killed. And finally, at the end, when it's too late, they figure out it's because the people's worst thoughts are being turned into like physical reality and killing them by this machine. And it ends with this guy saying, "Monsters from the id." And the reason why I bring that up, monsters from the id, is because I always feel when people tell me that Donald Trump is like singularly horrible in American history, I feel like he's the monster from the American id, and especially the Republican id, that he just physicalizes something that's been there all along. You know what I'm
I think it's a very appropriate analogy. But, you know, the task of the artist is to remind people that the monsters are not new.
Yeah, and that they can be defeated,
And
right?
that they can be defeated.
All right. Well, that is a perfect note to end on. So I think we will end there. Reverend Osagefu Sekou, thanks so much for joining us. The album is In Times Like These. And where can people go to find out where you're going to be?
ReverendSekou.com. And same thing, it's at Rev Sekou on Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear brother.